I'm Ashin Singh. It is Hump Day, Wednesday, August 19th. You've got questions and we've got answers. This is Search, where we're breaking down what you're asking right now in real time. Let's get right to it. We've got Maya Ephraim here. She oversees our online search trends. Maya, what are people searching for today?
Hi, Asha. Nice to see you. Following yesterday's Florida primary elections, voters are flooding search for analysis of the results. People are diving deep into individual races, looking up policies for candidates like Byron Donalds and Angie Nixon. And interestingly, Florida is currently searching for the term Democratic Socialist more than any other state in the country. People are looking up the definition, the core beliefs, and which candidates align with the movement. Turning to weather, forecasts for a potentially historic winter continue to drive up interest. I can see people are really curious about 2026 Super El Niño predictions and projected snowfall maps. People are also asking how a super event differs from a normal one and the difference between El Niño and La Niña. And finally, interest spikes every single day. Court is in session for the Lindsay Clancy murder trial. Viewers are specifically looking for videos of her former mother-in-law's testimony after a highly searched exchange with the prosecutors. Ashan, a newer search I'm also noticing is from people asking what happens if Clancy is found not guilty by reason of a lack of criminal responsibility.
Wow, a lot to get to today. Maya, thank you so much. We'll check back with you in just a bit. Okay, let's dive a little deeper into the story that you guys can't stop asking about. Florida's primary election results. And we've got our political director, Avery Harper, to break it down. Avery, the matchup is set. We've got the Democrat, David Jolly. We've got Byron Donalds as the Republican nominee. A lot of people are searching, and they want to know about their platforms and how they kind of stack up against each other.
Yeah, these are two very different candidates and nominees for their respective parties. So Congressman Byron Donalds, he's a staunch Trump ally. He is running on lowering property taxes and insurance rates and continuing conservative leadership in the state of Florida, whereas David Jolly, he is focused on being a moderate. He has talked a lot about the issue of affordability, supporting public education, abortion rights. It's important to note that in the state of Florida, there is not a single Democrat who holds a statewide office, so Jolly's definitely the underdog in this race.
Talk to me about the loss for Corey Mills, because we all thought that Trump endorsement would help carry him over, but it didn't. Talk to us about that controversy surrounding him, because we're seeing a lot of searches about that.
Yeah, he was facing a series of allegations from domestic abuse to sexual misconduct to even questions about his campaign finances. He was being investigated by the House Ethics Committee. He has denied all of those allegations, but despite having Trump's endorsements, we saw voters in the state of Florida in his district reject him and instead, casting ballots for Ryan Elijah, a former local television anchor.
Yeah, Avery, another familiar name that popped up was Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She was able to eke out her primary despite the redistricting in Florida. A lot of people are searching. What is her role in the Democratic Party? I know we've talked about her in the past, years ago now. Yeah,
she used to be the chair of the National Democratic Party. She actually did not represent this district originally. Her district was essentially eliminated because Florida redrew those districts in favor of Republicans. And so Wasserman Schultz opted to run in this majority black district, and that raised a lot of eyebrows. And so we saw her yesterday sort of acknowledge that, saying that she understands the importance of representation and she wants to ban gerrymandering as she returns to Congress representing the Florida's 20th congressional district.
And before I let you go, Maya mentioned that wild breakout search. Florida is searching democratic socialism more than any other state in the country. What does that say about the state? How do you read into that?
That's definitely because of Angie Nixon. She pulled off this massive upset in the Senate Democratic primary. She beat out Alex Vindman, who was running more as a moderate, even though he had outraised her, I think, like 16 times, 16 to 1. She had far less money, but voters ultimately chose her. She was campaigning on Medicare for all, on public housing, on affordable housing, and universal child care. And ultimately, that is what voters in Florida opted to choose over someone who has more name recognition, probably nationally, in Alex Vindman. And this does follow a sort of progressive wave that we've seen in other places like Michigan, New York, and Colorado. But again, Florida is a solidly Republican state, and so it's definitely going to be an uphill battle for her in this general election.
For sure. Avery, thank you so much for breaking it down. We'll be hearing more from you as the elections near. All right, let's get to your questions about El Nino predictions. Our meteorologist, Samara Theodore, has some answers for us. Samara, appreciate you joining us. I've got a confession to make. Anytime you, Leslie, Ginger, talk about El Nino, I am just smiling and nodding. And it seems that people on Search are agreeing with me. What actually is an El Nino and how often does it happen?
Okay, how much time do I have? No, let me go ahead and do my best to do this in a concise way. I'll answer the second part first. It happens every 2 to 7 years per se. Okay, so what is an El Nino? Here's how I want you to think of it. So we're in the Pacific. First, let's get our bearings. We have South America here. Usually we have these trade winds, and they're just like blowing the warm water in the ocean towards Asia. And so what happens like a conveyor belt is that warm water goes here, then we get this upwelling, this cool water coming up. So the waters tend to be a little bit cooler off the coast of South America there in the Pacific Ocean. What happens when those winds grow weak and things start to die down and become calmer? Now we start to see that warmer water not really being pushed anywhere, more so laxing and kind of floating back towards South America and into the central Pacific. So now we have this warm blob of water really circulating just south of Hawaii, closer to South America. And so we call that El Nino. It can change based on the trade winds.
I see. That makes a lot of sense. So what does that mean for El Nino 2026? What are your predictions there?
So first I want to talk about why it's important that we have that warm water where it's situated. It actually impacts the atmosphere. That's why it's important. What does it matter that the water's cold here or warm there? Well, where you have warm water, that's where you're going to get a lot of activity right above it. We know that warm water tends to heat the air right above it, and that's when we start to see a lot more activity in hurricanes. That's fuel for storms. It also can shift and really impact where the jet stream is situated. So where the warm water is located, it has a big impact on how weather plays out everywhere else on the globe. So here we have a more active season in the Pacific when it comes to hurricanes. We just had Lala in Hawaii, where things have been relatively quiet, right? In the Atlantic. That's what typically happens in an El Nino year. Not only that, these are the impacts on the lower 48. It tends to be wetter in the south, wetter and cooler in parts of the southeast. And then we get more drier conditions in the Midwest, and then it's warmer a little bit farther to the northwest.
I gotcha. Samara, you made me smarter today. I appreciate you, sis. And time to tee up the latest on the Lindsay Clancy murder trial. I've got our Peter Harlamis following the case. Peter, appreciate you being here, man. I can't go a day without seeing this topping Search. People are wondering when, if ever, will Lindsay Clancy actually take the stand in this case? Do you think it'll happen?
It's a good question. To me, it feels extremely unlikely, but not necessarily impossible. I think you have to consider the position she's currently in. She's someone who's actually at a state psychiatric facility, not necessarily stable, and testifying would require her go through cross-examination. That doesn't seem like a responsible thing for a defense lawyer to do, though she does have to affirmatively say yes or no in the coming days before the defense rests whether or not she wants to exert that right. For now, though, it's been not suggested by defense lawyers at any point that they're going to call her as a witness, though it's not technically impossible.
All right, and Peter, we're seeing a lot of searches on whether or not Lindsay actually remembers the night that she actually killed her kids. Have we heard anything about her from her attorneys about this?
Yeah, I mean, we've really heard a lot of details about this over the last 48 hours, specifically because they called a psychologist who met with Clancy in the days after those those killings, where Clancy had a phone call with her ex-husband, Patrick, where she basically described that she was hearing a voice in her head telling her to kill the children and then kill herself. According to her defense lawyer, she was in an episode of psychosis when she heard that voice, though we've now seen some testimony kind of pushing back on whether or not she heard that voice. For example, that psychologist testified today that the idea of her hearing voices in her head, that's not necessarily something that's in the medical records that existed prior to the incident, so her previous doctors didn't notice that. On top of that, she didn't really communicate hearing those voices other than that one phone call and a separate conversation apparently with a hospital chaplain.
Just so much nuance to this. Peter, I know we talked about this yesterday, but we're still seeing a lot of search interest in Susan Clancy, the former mother-in-law of Lindsay Clancy. What do we know about her?
Yeah, she took the stand yesterday in really a remarkable few hours of testimony where she went up on the stand and basically said Lindsay Clancy was begging for help, that her mental health was declining in the fall of 2022, and that she told her family members that she was struggling, that she needed help. Now, the mother-in-law is actually a nurse as well, so she not only helped connect Clancy to medical help, but she also helped her figure out her side effects from these medications she was taking. This really seems to be a push from defense lawyers to push back on this idea that Lindsay Clancy was unserious about her medical treatment. They argue she jumped from doctor to doctor, tried out different medications quickly, and then gave up and then plotted this scheme. What they're hearing with this witness is that she was reaching out for help, she was trying, and she was getting help from her family.
Peter, before I let you go real quick, people are wondering on Search, what would happen if Lindsay is deemed not guilty by lack of reason or of criminal responsibility?
Yeah, if she gets acquitted, she's ultimately going to spend the rest of her life likely in a psychiatric facility run by the state. According to one of those psychologists who treated her, basically she has bad days and worse days, and that basically every day she thinks about those 3 children who she killed.
Just such a sad story. Peter Haralamas, thanks so much for keeping us updated, man. We just ran through your top searches, but what else is on your timeline? Let's get back to Maya. Maya, what else is trending today?
Ashan, a massive $5 billion dividend payout from State Farm is driving hundreds of thousands of searches from people looking up who qualifies. State Farm customers who had an auto insurance policy at any point between January 1st and December 31st, 2025 are eligible for a refund. The company says the payments are possible because of stronger than expected financial performance. And if you're planning a vacation on the high seas, you might want to double check your booking. The CDC revealed its list of cruise ships with the worst sanitation scores for 2026. Travelers are now turning to Search and looking up scores by ship names to make sure their upcoming getaway did not make the list.
Look, Maya, no judgment from me, but the amount of news stories that we've done on the cruise world, I don't know if it's for me, you know? I think I'm gonna pass. Appreciate you, Maya. Coming up, one search always leads to another. We've got a trending topic, but that's just the surface. Authorities say 2 frats were involved in a cocaine trafficking ring at Penn State. We've got The Spiral. It's up next. Welcome back to Search. Today's top searches are only part of the story. A simple scroll can sometimes take you down a deep rabbit hole. It's time now for The Spiral. All right, you guys can't stop asking questions about Penn State, and we're following your clicks and curiosity, and it looks like you guys want to know about a major cocaine bust there and frat culture on college campuses. So let's break it down. We've got our Andrew Dimbert up first, then we've got Adam McCready. Fellas, thank you so much for being here. Let's start with the latest on the investigation into the frat brothers charged in that alleged cocaine trafficking ring at Penn State. Andrew Dimbert has been here following the story for us. Andrew, appreciate you being here, man. So authorities say that this involves 2 fraternities, one that has now been suspended, and another that Penn State says wasn't even recognized as an official frat on campus. How did law enforcement crack down on this, and what is Penn State saying?
Yeah, so essentially Penn State can't really, at least at this point, sort of suspend or punish that other fraternity because they said it never had any affiliation to the university. But as for this investigation, you know, this didn't happen overnight. This was years of police work here, 2 years, a long-term investigation really. And it all started when a detective went undercover and started making controlled purchases of the cocaine. Those purchases helped investigators uncover what they called a large-scale operation. And uncovering all of this then allowed prosecutors to get a statewide grand jury, and now you have 14 individuals facing charges, some of them really serious felonies, including conspiracy.
Oh my gosh, seems kind of unbelievable. So Andrew, the Attorney General has dubbed this investigation as Operation Drugs Unlimited. Like you said, 14 people have been charged. What exactly are they being accused of?
Well, it's important to note, and prosecutors say this, that this is not just a case of college kids possessing cocaine, and it's not even a case of college kids possessing a lot of cocaine. They say this was a sophisticated operation. They allege that the drugs were brought in from Philadelphia and New York. They were cut up, packaged, and sold at those 2 fraternity houses and then sold primarily to Penn State University students. 4 of the defendants are facing major felonies, including the conspiracy charges I mentioned. Some are facing misdemeanor possession charges, and one is the father of one of the alleged dealers. he's accused of helping conceal drugs and obstructing the investigation, Ashen.
Feels like a plot of a movie, Andrew. And so obviously we're talking about frats here. So was this just a drug ring, or did this somehow tie into, frat hazing as we know it?
Well, the short answer is both, and this is where this case gets really disturbing here. According to court documents, one of those fraternities actually employed, if you will, some of its pledges and forced them into taking part in this operation to package and to distribute the drug. And remember, pledging is, that process where you try to get into the fraternity, the hazing ritual. So it involved these drugs, according to prosecutors. But this is not a hazing case. This is far more serious. It's a cocaine trafficking ring case. Ashen.
Andrew, is really unbelievable. Appreciate you breaking this down for us. Let's now bring in Adam McCready. He's an associate professor in residence of higher education with expertise in college men and fraternities. Thank you so much for being here. So student affairs at Penn State are saying that criminal activity, including hazing, has, quote, no place at our institution. Does this drug bust at Penn State come as a surprise for you?
Not really. I mean, I think fraternities have been associated with social experience and parties and even drug use for decades, if not over a century now. So no, not a surprise. I think, in fact, when I was a fraternity professional, there was a drug bust on my campus. And so not a new phenomenon, but I think the scope and severity of this issue is certainly concerning.
Yeah, Adam, I definitely remember it happening on my campus as well. And so fraternities and sorority chapters, they'll say that they don't condone hazing or abuse. But you and I both know that hazing does occur, and sometimes it can be deadly. Why is hazing an unofficial tradition for some members in Greek life? Like, how do we make sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, first it's important to recognize that hazing is incurred on college campuses before fraternities and sororities ever existed, and that these organizations simply adopted the behaviors that were already occurring on their campus when they began to indoctrinate new members into their experiences. And so the first fraternity hazing death actually happened in the late 19th century. So not a new phenomenon. I think that fraternities are, when they bring in new members, are finding ways to gatekeep. I think fraternity hazing issues are often more significant, or hazing is more significant often in fraternities than sororities, because masculinity and manhood are often associated with competition and risk-taking and violence. And so I think as new members try to secure the power and the social prestige that fraternities have, they're willing to engage in behaviors that might be risky, or engage behaviors like this drug related phenomenon at Penn State.
For sure. And I mean, break this down for me, especially for people who are not familiar with Greek life. Like, what is the lure for pledges? Like, why are they willing to participate in things like hazing, potentially criminal activity, like what we're seeing with these two fraternities at Penn State? Like, why even step into this realm?
Yeah, and I first want to say that, like, when you pledge or become a new member in a fraternity, it's not always about hazing, right? So this is not a consistent phenomenon across all organizations. I think particularly for fraternity chapters or houses that have status, new members are willing to engage in behaviors to access that status and prestige on their campus. And so on institutions like Penn State, where you have these large fraternity houses and the fraternities and sororities are the social outlet for campus, new members are willing to engage in behaviors they might not willingly be able to do or willing to do in order to gain access to that social prestige and that social environment.
You talked a little bit about the history of Greek life. Like, what actually, just help contextualize this for me. Like, what is the overall and long-term benefit of joining a fraternity, of actually pledging, and what is the appeal as it dates to sort of generations ago?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at their best, right, fraternities are about places to find community and find belonging, and can often help members find supports and resources to be successful in college. I mean, many of these organizations have extensive alumni or undergraduate networks where members are willing to support each other through the college experience, but also throughout life. I was a fraternity member, and some of my closest friends in this world are folks that I went to college with or were members elsewhere. And that, when fraternities were founded 200 years ago on campuses, they were the sole social outlet for members at colleges who otherwise were under like strict policies and oversight from faculty. So for a long, long time, they've been an opportunity to build community and friendship but at their very worst, right, they can perpetuate harms in these extreme environments like at Penn State.
For sure. Two sides to every coin. Adam, appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for joining us. Still ahead, it might be at the top of your feed, but what's the vibe? We've got your top pop culture and entertainment searches with Roxy Diaz, including a health update from Celine Dion before she returns to the stage. We got the vibe check. Is next. It is time now for our vibe check, a look at what's buzzing in entertainment and pop culture. Our Roxy Diaz joins me now for more on what's trending on your feeds. Roxy, what's going on, sis? What's the vibe?
Hey, Ash. So listen, Bernard the Elf is hanging up his hat. David Krumholtz, beloved from the Santa Claus, Numbers, and Oppenheimer, announced on social media he's taken an indefinite break from acting, summing up his state of mind: frustrated, fed up, and fried. The actor citing disillusionment with actor pay and the pressure to build a social following just to stay employable. But after fans and fellow actors rallied, he says he's not quitting entirely, just wondering if there's a higher calling to pursue, like motivational speaking for kids. Now, rock lost a legend. Frank Beard, ZZ Top's drummer for 56 years, died in hospice care at his Texas ranch with family by his side. His death was announced on the band's website. His backbeat powered the trio from 1971 through Legs, Sharp Dressed Man, and a Rock Hall induction. Bill Gibbons, now the last original member of the band, called Beard one of the most naturally innovative drummers and a great and true son of Texas. And the irony was always this part, all right? Now, the legend that was named Beard was the only member without one. Billy Gibbons joking about it, saying Frank's beard is on his driver's license. So there you go. And Celine Dion is ready for her moment. The 58-year-old sharing a health update in an interview with Harper's Bazaar ahead of her 5-week Paris residency. It's her first real run of shows since her stiff person syndrome diagnosis. The vocalist saying that she had symptoms for 17 years before her 2022 diagnosis. She's now training like an athlete, including 90-minute Pilates sessions 3 times a week. And a demand for her Paris residency was intense, with tickets that sold out instantly. 3 weeks have been added in 2027. Near, far, wherever you are, the heart goes on, and Celine Dion is proof of that. And last but not least, Robin Williams' kids have revived his Instagram account, and they say it's to fight, quote, rampant AI abuse of his voice and likeliness. In a statement, Zach, Zelda, and Cody say as technology evolves, they want this to be a safe, trusted place where stories, photos, videos, and memories shared reflect his legacy with authenticity, warmth, and care. And Williams' daughter Zelda taking to her personal account after the statement to apologize for posting on his account, saying, "I know it's a little strange, but she says it's the best way to fight back against deep fakes." And Ash, the last post before this week was from 2014. Williams posted a birthday tribute to Zelda. That was just 2 weeks before his death. You know, he is always going to be remembered as a true icon.
That's so true. What a legend. I think about all the movies he's done. You know, you think about Patch Adams, Jumanji. But you know the real sleeper, Roxy? I still got that VHS of Flubber. I don't know if you remember that.
Flubber?
Flubber, man.
Oh,
Flubber. No, we got to bring Flubber out the vault. That
wow.
Put some
I thought you were
respect on
going to say
Flubber.
Mrs. Doubtfire
Oh, you
or
how could I forget Mrs. Doubtfire? But
he has some of the best quotes out there. If you just like Google Robin Williams quotes, he was just such a great, kind-hearted man. Best quotes ever.
And a low-key style icon too. Rox, I appreciate you very much. All right, I'm Ashin Singh, and this is Search on ABC News Live, where your questions meet real answers. We'll leave you with what's trending right now on abcnews.com. You can scan that QR code right there to catch up, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Be safe.